Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm just going to give you my first impressions of Weather Machine. I just did a full solo playthrough of Weather Machine, so if you haven't checked that out, please do so, because I'm going to assume that you've either watched that playthrough or you know how Weather Machine works. Now, if you follow the channel, you know I'm a big Vital Lacerda fan. In fact, I just did a top 50 games of all time series of videos, and 4 of his games were in there, including one in the top 10. If you haven't seen those videos, please go watch those as well, because I might spoil that list a little bit here. Now, I want to make it clear that this discussion is about the solo mode of Weather Machine, because I have not played this multiplayer at all. I've played the solo game 4 times, and I feel like that was enough to really give me a firm grasp of how I feel about it personally. And I won't bury the lead here because I'm not trying to string you guys along. Weather Machine is now my favorite Vital Lacerda game to play solo. I would still put Kanban EV as my favorite Vital Lacerda game overall, but of course I've played that many times solo and multiplayer at all player counts. Maybe once I get Weather Machine to the table at 2 and 3 players, I'm really excited to play at those player counts. Maybe it'll rise. But as of right now, I'd put Kanban EV number 1, Weather Machine number 2, and the Gallerist number 3. And again, I want to make it really clear, I've played the Gallerist solo and multiplayer a bunch, but as far as something like Lisboa, which I would put at number 4 now, I haven't played that solo very much at all. Not enough to get a really strong feeling about it. So that's a little bit of a blind spot for me. I've played Lisboa quite a bit multiplayer, especially at 2 players. And the game everyone asked me about, On Mars, I haven't played that enough solo or multiplayer, and I really want to get the solo game of On Mars, especially with the expansion, to the table soon, but it hasn't happened yet. So I have a lot of blind spots here when it comes to Vital Lacerda, a ton more to explore still. So please keep that in mind as I'm discussing my rankings of his games and how I feel about Weather Machine in comparison. Okay, enough of that. Let's get down to talking about Weather Machine. And I have a ton of positives to say, but I'm going to start with pretty much my only one negative here. I mean, certainly this is a heavy game. There's a heavy Euro game. There's a lot of rules, and there's a lot of little rules that are easy to forget in the heat of the moment. In fact, I did that in the playthrough. There are a couple of little things I missed. And it's just easy to do because there's a lot going on, especially when you're playing solo and having to manage, the solo opponents. But that just comes with the territory. That's going to be every heavy Euro game. You expect that, and it's no more, prevalent here than it is in any other heavy Euro. So I don't really consider that a negative. That's just something you have to keep in mind when you're tackling one of these games. My only real little negative is that I feel like Weather Machine is maybe not quite as thematic as some of his other games. One of Vital Lacerda's strengths as a designer is making these heavy games that are very mechanical, but give me a lot of thematic feelings. At the end of the day, they end up feeling really thematic despite all the heavy mechanisms. I think of Vinos, which is incredibly thematic, or even Kanban. One of the things I love about that game is how much theme comes through. With Weather Machine, I felt that a little bit less. It's still there, don't get me wrong. I think there's still a lot of really neat thematic touches. I like the idea that you're running the old Weather Machine in order to, gain the research that you need to improve it. But in doing so, you are creating negative effects. And that could really come back to bite you. I also love this idea that the government is, giving you these subsidies to help you along in your research. That just makes sense. I also just like being scientists doing research, That's just a really cool theme, I like games that let me play as nerds, right? That's what I want, and this does that. So if you compare this to other heavy Euros, this is incredibly thematic. I just think maybe it's a touch less than some of his other games. But really, that's my only negative. Other than that, I really, really love the gameplay here. And it's funny, your mileage may vary, but I found myself able to grasp Weather Machine a lot quicker than, say, Kanban, for instance, or even Lisboa. For some reason, Lisboa does not fit well with my brain. I struggle with some of the concepts there. On Mars, I had a really hard time learning for some reason. Weather Machine was not like that at all. After my first play, I really felt like I understood what was happening, how things fit together. I had a much better idea of what I needed to do in order to score points. And I also felt like the solo mode was way more easy to manage here than in Kanban in particular. Now, once again, I've done a full solo playthrough of Kanban, so you can go watch that and see how that works. This reminds me a lot of that, but it's just so much more easy to manage. In Kanban, you have you have your two coworkers. You also have Sandra, your boss, that's doing things, and so you end up managing 3 different NPCs. Here, there are 2 saboteurs. You have these 2 spies running around, and you also have, Professor Latif, but he's extremely easy, much easier to manage than Sandra. He's doing far less. And on the saboteur's turn, you're flipping over a card and you're only activating one of them, one or the other, not both. And so it's just less management. So you get more time on your own turn, less to think about on theirs. And I also really like that you get to see what they're going to do on their turn. You get that advanced knowledge and you can plan for that. You can work with it and you can even change it. I really like the way that that works out. You have a little of that in Kanban, but far less. Now, there's definitely more here than, say, in the Gallerist, right? The Gallerist is a very simple AI system, very exploitable. This, I think, is a happy medium. And in fact, overall, I'd say that Weather Machine fits really nicely between Kanban and the Gallerist, fitting right there in between in terms of complexity, just in regular gameplay, but also in the solo mode. And I like that. That fits in a really nice spot for me. And it's why Weather Machine is now my go-to Vital Lacerda solo game. I still think if someone was new to Heavy Euros, was new to Lacerda, I would start with the Gallerist. I still think that's the most accessible. At 3 or 4 players, I still think Kanban probably shines. That's my instinct. I love Vinos at 2. I love the Gallerist at any player count. I love Lisboa at 2. Now, one thing I think that really separates Weather Machine from some of his other designs is that it feels like with this voucher system, where you need to spend these vouchers when you take these actions, you can definitely get yourself into trouble easier in Weather Machine than I think in some of his other games. You could, if you're not paying attention, if you're not being careful, you could run out of vouchers and get a little stuck for a couple rounds. Right? There's ways of getting out of it, there's ways of collecting vouchers, but you can definitely have turns here where you're not able to really do the things that you need to do. Now, I think the more and more you play, the better you get at avoiding that. And you can sort of see the little pitfalls and, you know kind of what not to do, right? You want to go to that subsidy space that lets you just activate a subsidy and get those extra vouchers just to give yourself a leg up, right? Things like that. But it can feel tight and a bit of a struggle because this is a game about getting your ducks in a row. And there's a lot of ducks, and you really have to get them in the exact row. You don't have a ton of wiggle room. But I actually really like that. I like that you have to pay attention to your vouchers. I like the tension that that brings. So overall, Weather Machine is just another home run. This team of Vital Lacerda and Ian O'Toole can really do no wrong. This gets a huge recommendation from me if you like Vital Lacerda games. If you're not into Heavy Euros, I don't know if this one's going to really change your mind. And I just can't wait to get this one to the table to try it at 2 players and 3 players. Until then, if I'm looking for a heavy solo game, this is definitely the one I'm going to turn to. So there you go. Those are my first impressions of Weather Machine. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.